โอเคสวัสดีครับสวัสดีทุกคนนะครับถ้าใครเข้ามาแล้วได้ยินเสียงชัดเจนช่วยคอมเมนต์ในไลฟ์ให้ผมทีนะครับเดี๋ยวเรารออีกสักประมาณ 1-2 นาทีนะครับก่อนที่จะเข้าไลฟ์เสียงน่าจะได้ยินชัดเจนนะครับใครเข้ามาแล้วอย่าลืมกดไลค์กดแชร์เป็นกำลังใจให้พวกเราด้วยนะครับวันนี้เซสชันนี้จริงๆต้องบอกว่าสนุกมากๆนะครับเป็นเซสชันระหว่างคุณท็อปจิรายุทธนะครับจากบิตคัพพูดคุยกับคุณสุเคนนะครับmanaging partner ของบริษัท VC จากประเทศสิงคโปร์นะครับมาพูดถึงเรื่องการทำสตาร์ทอัพในช่วงเริ่มต้นนะครับว่าข้อผิดพลาดบทเรียนที่ได้เรียนรู้เนี่ยคืออะไรบ้างวันนี้จริงๆต้องขอเกริ่นก่อนว่าอย่างที่แจ้งไปใน post promote นะครับเซสชันของเราจะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับเพราะว่าแขกจะมีการพูดคุยเป็นภาษาอังกฤษแต่ไม่ต้องห่วงครับเดี๋ยวทีมงานจะทำการแปลแล้วก็สรุปสาระสำคัญไว้ใต้คอมเมนต์นะครับแล้วก็ปักหมุดไว้ให้ถ้าใครเข้ามาแล้วระหว่างนี้สามารถอ่านบทความของทั้งพี่ท็อปที่ทุกคนน่าจะรู้จักกันดีอยู่แล้วกับสุเคนนะครับแขกรับเชิญของเราในวันนี้เนี่ยได้ที่ลิงก์ในคอมเมนต์เลยเรื่องราวและชีวิตเนี่ยสนุกมากๆนะครับเพื่ออรรถรสในการรับชมตอนนี้เข้ามา100คนแล้วนะครับขอดูคอมเมนต์แป๊บนึงชัดเจนครับโอเคขอบคุณครับโอเค97คนโอเคพร้อมนะฮะทุกอย่างดูน่าจะโอเคเรามาเริ่มกันเลยครับก็สวัสดีอีกครั้งนะครับผมพีระเดชมุขยังกูลครับพบกับรายการ Talk with Top นะครับรายการไลฟ์สดผ่านเพจของคุณท็อปจิรายุทธที่จะมาพูดคุยกับเพื่อนๆพี่ๆในหลากหลายวงการนะครับกับหัวข้อที่เราเชื่อว่าน่าจะเป็นที่น่าสนใจแล้วก็เป็นประโยชน์ต่อทุกท่านนะครับร่วมสนทนากับผมครับผู้ก่อตั้ง Career Fact สื่อที่เจาะลึกเรื่องราวการงานและอาชีพนะครับหลังจากนี้จะขอเปลี่ยนโหมดเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับแล้วก็ถ้ามีอะไรทั้งหลายแหล่เนี่ยเราก็จะทำการแปลไว้นะครับ so good afternoon everyone welcome to Talk with Top a Facebook live session with Kun Topp Jirayut who will discuss insightful topics with many interesting figures in the industries. My name is Piradet Mukhayangun, co-founder of Career Fact, media focused on sharing career stories that hope to inspire everyone. So this is our second episode and our topic for today is first-time founder mistakes. So I believe that being a founder is definitely a tough and challenging, yet very rewarding in many ways. So today we will discuss on the toughness and challenges part. I think it's typical for founders to make mistakes. So for today, hopefully everyone will be able to learn from our guests and not repeat the same mistake. Without further ado, firstly let me introduce Kun Topp Jirayut, Subsea Sopa, founders and group CEO of BitCup. สวัสดีครับคุณท็อป
สวัสดีครับ Hello everyone.
Yeah. And our special guest for today, Hsu Ken Ooi. Hsu Ken is currently a managing partner of Iterative. Iterative provides stage funding for early stage startup companies. He is previously a co-founder at Decide, which was then acquired by eBay in 2013. Thank you for tuning in, Hsu Ken.
Hey P, nice to be here.
Cool. So, all right, let's get started. I think enough talk for me. So let's get started with the first questions. So both of you actually had a full-time job before taking on this entrepreneur path at a very young age. So the questions would be, what made the change? What actually made you decide to quit your jobs? Starting from Hsu Ken.
So I think for me, it was, I think from a early age, I really wanted to optimize for like the rate of learning. And so I think at the time I was like, I definitely turned down some jobs that were going to pay me a lot more money. And I just thought that early in the career it was better to kind of invest in yourself. So I went for the jobs where I thought I was going to learn the most, over kind of maybe, let's say kind of jobs that paid higher salaries. And to me, I think doing a startup seemed to be like the thing that I was going to learn the most from. It was certainly kind of the most challenging. And so I think, the switch for me was just like, hey, I think being a founder, I'm going to learn the most from. And when I was young, I feel like I could take more risk. So I mean, I think that for me was kind of enough to do it.
All right, cool. What about Kun Top? So I know that you have a short period of time where you take a full-time jobs and then you decide that that's not it. Then you change your path into an entrepreneur.
Sure. Actually, I wanted to be a footballer when I was younger. Entrepreneurship is not from not in my head at all. Right? I wasn't a very good student either. I always got into fights. My parents had enough. Sent me to New Zealand to a boarding school. They tried to change the environment, hoping that their son would get better, right, to be a better student. Still, I didn't focus on study, at all. Up until after the high school graduation, I couldn't get into any of the good university. That left a big scar on my heart. What kind of person is myself, right? I couldn't get into a good university. So I tried to, that's the change in my life where I started to focus on studying. I studied 10, 12 hours per day at university. Eventually got into a very good school for my master's, right? Oxford University. For every period of my life, I only had one focus. During my undergraduate study, my only goal was to get into a top university, right? During my master's degree, my only focus was to graduate from this place. Super hard, right? Oxford. Didn't want to waste my parents' money and at the time there. After graduation, I was like traditional students. I was lost. I didn't know what to do with my life. I think one thing that I shared with Hsu Ken is that I was optimizing for skill sets rather than paychecks. For every traditional economic student, I was reading economics at school. We all went for investment banking at Goldman Sachs, consulting at BCG, McKinsey, huge paychecks, right? But I was optimizing for skill sets, experience. So I had enough with the UK, experience. So I decided to fly over to China when the economy was booming. That was back in 2013. I started with an investment banking job. I was discovering what I liked, what I disliked back then. I was working in a very boutique investment banking firm because I didn't want to be a small jigsaw in a big company, doing one thing. Even though if this company is a reputable company, right? I wasn't looking for brand or reputation. I was looking for optimizing skill sets. I didn't like investment banking job. I tried going to San Francisco to work as a financial consultant for a few weeks. Didn't like consulting job either. I was lost. But luckily, during that 1 month job transition between Shanghai and San Francisco, I didn't want to waste that 1 month gap. I decided to book a ticket to the Philippines. I started emailing my friends. What can I help? What can I do? Luckily Beryl Lee, a friend of mine from when I met her in the UK, she emailed me and said, "Top startup ecosystem is booming in the Philippines. Why don't you come and help out?" And I think that trip changed my life. That's when I discovered entrepreneurship because Beryl introduced me to Ron Hos, Runer, and especially Bowie Guy. Bowie was an entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, right? He founded Card Munch and sold it to LinkedIn. Then he flew to the Philippines to start what we call a World Startup Report. So I was helping with Bowie. But one thing I learned from Bowie was that one dinner discussion. He said, "Top, why are you flying to the San Francisco to start a job in a month's time? You graduated from Oxford. You're very young. You can work 24/7. You have no risk, no children, no family, no wife to look after. Your parents still here to give you moral support. Why don't you go and start your own thing? Your risk is very low. Your opportunity cost is very low. But it's not going to be the same when you're 40 years of age, right? When you're 40 years of age, you have kids, you have family to look after. Your parents are no longer here to give you moral support, right? And you cannot work 24/7 like you are now, right? It's not vice versa. But if you start a startup now and it fails, you can walk into any of the company and they would gladly give you a job with your Oxford degree, right? That totally changed my understanding about entrepreneurship. So after that, I flew to the San Francisco. I discovered entrepreneur environment, talked to people at the pub. Everyone was like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm creating this startup, talking with full passion of how their startup is going to change the world. It's a very interesting place, San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So that second job didn't last very long, even less than the first job, right? So I booked a ticket back home and started my entrepreneurship journey. So I think one thing that I shared with Hsu Ken is that I wasn't looking for huge paychecks after graduation, wasn't going after brand names. I was optimizing for skill sets, trying to discover what I like, what I dislike. And luckily, the people that I met, completely changed my perspective about career, right? The opportunity cost is much higher when we start a company later on in life. And I was fortunate. I was in one of the 1% of the world where my parents didn't need money from me, right? I can, take risk. So might as well, optimize this opportunity where everyone else cannot afford the same.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's something that probably Hsu Ken can relate as well in terms of the stories and then everything.
Yeah, I mean, I was just listening to your story. I also was not a very good student in school, and I don't know whether that's something entrepreneurs are a little bit rebellious. I just got into a lot of trouble, and I had a very similar story to you where I just wasn't that great of a student, and then something kind of switched. So I wasn't a very good student, and my parents tried to kind of be very strict with me, and they were like, okay, you have to study, and they tried to get me tutors and all this stuff, and I wasn't having any of it. And then halfway through high school, at least in the US, they sat me down and they said, we're kind of giving up on you. We've tried to do everything that we can to help you out, and we have done our duty as parents to help you. You make your own decisions now, right? If you don't want to do good in school, fine. Don't go to college. It's up to you, right? And or you make your own choices. And so when they after they had that conversation with me, then I really sat down and was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? And I think it sounds like you had a similar point too, where it was after that, I studied a lot. Once they kind of sat down and had that with me, it was I was studying nonstop after that. So I don't know if that's a common entrepreneurship thing, but I think I hear that a lot sometimes with entrepreneurs. There's some rebellious streaks sometimes.
Cool. Yeah, so I think right now that audience have begun to understand why did you actually what made you switch to this entrepreneur path. Let's get right into the struggles that you have when you first started your business. I'm sure that there are tons of it that you learned from it. Yeah, starting from Kun Topp.
Sure. So after I booked the ticket back home, I started the first Bitcoin wallet company in Thailand. I felt guilty back then because my parents paid me 10 full years of education abroad, right? 5 years in New Zealand, 5 years in the UK. I did not want to use any more of my parents' money. And I was just a kid, after graduation, right? I had no, barely any savings. So one thing that I asked my mom, my parents, they have their own garment business, selling clothes, right? Clothing. And they have this shop in Pratunam Center, a very small shop. I only ask my parents for one thing. Can I use a spare room on the second floor to use this room as an office? So I started the coins from one single chair, one single table, a sign at the back of the wall saying coins, COTH, incorporating the company with just one person. And the struggle, I had so many, to be honest, the first startup was hell for me. I would not do the same thing again, right? It's just that one thing that, it's one of those things that you only do it once and not again in your life. For example, Oxford education, I would not repeat the same thing again, right? It's just that once after you check the box and that's it. Same with the first startup, it was hell. Right? I was in a spare clothing shop by myself, not talking to anyone with a single laptop. I did not pay myself for the first 9 months of starting the first company. I was saving every single penny, bootstrapping, right? Doing everything. It was that bad, so bad that I designed the front end website. When people inject a buy order, I would go to local Bitcoin, another wallet company, to buy Bitcoin arbitrage from another website to get my customers the Bitcoin, right? And when they sell Bitcoin, I would quickly sell the Bitcoin at another local Bitcoin website, and then I would give my customers the money because there were no resources. I didn't want to use any of my parents' money. We could not raise any funds at the start as well. So I was saving every single penny, working by myself. I couldn't socialize also, by the way. All the Oxford Cambridge students, we have this one event per year. We call it Oxbridge dinner, where we all meet and for once per year. And all the students would be asking each other like, what are you up to now after graduation? Everyone would be like, yeah, I'm working at Goldman Sachs. Yeah, I'm working at McKinsey. Then when it got up to me, Top, what are you up to? I said, I created a startup. How many people in your company? Just myself. What are you doing? Bitcoin. Bitcoin? I'm pretty sure that's a Ponzi scheme. What are you doing with your life, Top? I couldn't socialize even back then. After 8-9 months of founding, the company, save every penny. When I started to hire the first employee, no one would even come and work with me, even though I have the money to pay them, because there are a few reasons. The first thing, when they visit the office, they were shocked, right? This is not a financial company. This is like a clothing shop. This is definitely not a Bitcoin company. Right? Clothes everywhere, right? Then the second reason, how many people in the company? One CEO, 23 years old, right? And then the third reason, the biggest reason, what are you doing? It's a Bitcoin startup. I'm pretty sure that's a Ponzi scheme, right? So no one wanted to work, even though I had the money to pay them. My first 2 employees were my cousins. I had to convince T and Jane to join me in my spare room. Then I think the main challenge is from the first startup is to do things that people don't really understand. Right? I got a letter from the anti-money laundering officers. Right? My parents went crazy. Right, so Top, you can walk into any of the office and get a proper job. Everyone would gladly welcome you with the Oxford degree. Why are you laundering money at home? Right, that's my dad. That's what he said. Go and shut the company down tomorrow. We had a lot of fights in the family. Even my parents did not understand what Bitcoin was. Right, and I don't know if you remember in 2014, the Bank of Thailand also issued a letter saying that Bitcoin could be a Ponzi scheme. The value could go to zero anytime. It was an official formal letter to every commercial banks in Thailand. Do not go anywhere near it, right? Who would you think my parents would believe, right? A recently graduated son or the Bank of Thailand. So we had like a lot of fights. Could not hire anyone. Not just the anti-money laundering officers, right? The Bank of Thailand also called me to explain what we're doing. Are we creating a competing currency? Do you have licenses, for this kind of business? Even the revenue department came to our office. I think that's another one of the biggest mistakes. I had zero knowledge about accounting. Right? I had to do everything myself, right, from the start. Maintaining the general ledger, trial balance, outsourcing without knowing what's happening. So we had to clean up the whole thing when the revenue department visited our company. A lot of sleepless nights. Everyone became an accountant after like 7 p.m. up until 3 a.m. every day, trying to reconcile all the transaction. And also, with the issues with the anti-money laundering officers, I called all my friends working at a legal company, like a reputable legal firm. No one wanted to help. No one wanted to risk their career to help because Bitcoin was in a gray area, right? So I think the hardest part is, creating a company is hard already, right? Because you learn so much. You have to wear different hats, different skill sets, do everything trying to make it work. But what's harder is that doing things that people are against and and don't understand, right? Even against it, right? And what is more challenging is that you're handling people's money, right? Handling people's money. You're not opening a company that sells T-shirts online. You can cut corners, you can break things. But running a financial company, you cannot break things. You cannot, you handle. You have responsibility. You cannot cut corners. So, during the first 4 or 5 years of the first company, I learned so much. I could not get this experience anywhere, right? I can challenge, or I can, challenge everyone here that if you're thinking about starting a company or go and work for someone, if you are one of the top 1% that have the luxury to risk to start your own company, I would encourage you to start your own company. I can guarantee that the first few years of starting your own company, you will learn more than 5 or 10 years working for someone else, because you have to learn everything, wear different hats, doing everything, trying to make sure that the company survives. So that's a quick summary of the first startup. That it's one of those things that you would only do it once in your life, and you would not do it again. It was super painful, right? But you grow as a person. You've learned so much, and now I founded BitCup. Within two years and 9 months, we already became the biggest blockchain company in the country, and one of the most profitable fintech startup in Thailand. We raised the largest seed round. We haven't touched a single penny of our investors' money. We run the company based on profit. 200 people team now. 600% growth this year, 400% growth last year. You will not repeat the same mistakes. I think that's the price. You have to pay as an entrepreneur, right? To learn faster than everyone else's.
Definitely. I think that's really like one kind of the story. Like seeing BitCup now is very successful, but then seeing the story backward make kind of you understand like why the reasons they are here today. So switching over to Hsu Ken, like does that like I feel that you have also like gone through many like struggles and iterations of your business. Like, can you share with us a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories kind of similar, and I think it's common in the Valley and it's common in Southeast Asia. I think it's just a first-time founder experience. We have this joke back in Silicon Valley that what's the best advice you can give a first-time founder, and as the joke goes, is become a second-time founder, because there's just no kind of like there's no substitute for being a first-time founder and kind of making all the mistakes, right? You can read all the blog posts you want, but like you're still going to have quite a tough time. And a lot of things are the same. So we spent the first I didn't make any money for the first 2 years we started the first company. So we had no salary. We worked in my brother's basement. And in order to save money, we didn't turn on the heat. And so it'd be snowing outside and I'd be sitting at a folding desk, like a folding table with like in a sleeping bag with like a hat on because it was just so cold. And so you kind of have a lot of these stories. And like Topp was saying, I think the toughest thing that you go through, which is probably not talked about a lot, is all of the internal personal stuff that you have going on. So, you are like pouring your like heart into doing this thing, and, you have your own doubts about it. And then you have a lot of people sharing their doubts about it, right? So you're talking to friends like Topp was saying, and I had this similar thing. So I was in Seattle and my friends were working at Microsoft and Google and Facebook, and I was going to my brother's basement, right? My bank account was getting smaller and their bank account was getting considerably larger. And it's really tough to kind of persevere through that, to kind of do something that a lot of people don't understand. And look, I think I had it easier than Topp. I think Bitcoin, when Topp started, was like even less understood. Like I was trying to do kind of like a traditional startup. So I think Topp had it probably even worse than I did. But you really have to kind of like find out what your internal motivation is in order to kind of like get through those times. And honestly, I think like Topp was saying, like we were fortunate to kind of start. I think I was 22 when we started. There is something to be said about being kind of like young and naive. Like I just didn't know any better. And so you end up starting these things and then you find yourself in these situations and you kind of work your way out of them. And I think so there's a lot of this kind of like personal self-doubt that comes in. I think one of the challenging things we find, especially when you're talking to investors, is you have a lot of doubt and then you're trying to convince investors that they should do this thing. And you're not totally sure about that thing. And so there's this weird thing where you go into board meetings and you're convincing people of stuff and you're not totally sure about them. But I think the first thing we ran up against was, especially if you're just coming out of school and you come through this like structured program where you have grades and there's a lot of structure and you know whether you're doing well or not, right? You take tests and you get good grades. I think doing a startup was the first time that like you don't have any of that. So, you know, when we probably built 24 products before the one that eventually became Decide.com. And it's like, nobody cared about any of it, right? So I was worried that people were going to hate it. But what ended up happening was nobody cared enough to hate it. Like, I kind of wish people would hate it because at least they noticed. And it turned out like nobody cares, right? It's like a privilege to get to the point where anybody cares enough about your thing to like hate it, let alone like it. And so that was like very disheartening. I just never had worked so hard in my life only for it to not matter to anybody, right? And it just kind of happened over and over. And I think you eventually kind of like get better at figuring out, okay, what are the types of things that people are kind of interested in, and how do you build products? And let's not spend, you know, a year writing code and not launching things. Like, you kind of learn all of these things, but I think that initial like apathy that you get from people of just not caring about what you're building, and was like quite tough. Topp, I don't know if you kind of ran into any of that when you were kind of first starting out. Like, did you build stuff that people kind of didn't kind of resonate with people?
We tried all the different kinds of marketing trying to get noticed, to be honest. Yeah. The Bitcoin market was small enough, right, back then, because a lot of people know about it, right? But the good thing about that is that there's no competition, because no one believes in what we do. We are the only Bitcoin company, and we just try to compete against the rest of the world, trying to convince them that what we're doing is right. The rest of the world is wrong about what we're doing. So we kind of like try all kinds of different marketing techniques trying to get noticed. I mean, and that happens to every company, I guess.
So just to jump on top of your thing, that's like a really interesting point, because sometimes we see startups where sometimes there are ideas and there's a lot of competition. So they don't really have to convince people that this is like a good space, because there's a lot of people doing it, right? So you just need to beat your competitors or be better than them. And sometimes you see ideas like yours, and especially crypto early on, which was most people don't believe it. And so you're kind of working in this space where you're like, okay, either we are very smart and we recognize something other people are not seeing, or like we are kind of dumb and everybody recognizes that this is not a thing except for us, right? And that latter part of like believing in something that most people don't believe is often where a lot of the innovation comes from, but it's also the hardest on the founders because they need to believe it even further, right? And so I don't know, I've always thought that's like an interesting kind of like, there's different types of ideas.
Yeah, so I think, the thing that really moved the needle are those ideas that, most people are wrong. The very minority of the people are very right. Although all of the successful people in the past were very right about one particular thing that most people got it wrong, right? Even Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs. Because you have to find this truth where the rest of the world doesn't notice, because you will become a monopoly and make the most impact, right? When you're the minority that is right, and there is no competition as well. So you have the most opportunity when you're doing things that the rest of the world is not ready, but it became true at the end. So I think that's one of the techniques that I would share to the future founders. If you go around and tell everyone, is this a good idea, and the rest of the world or everyone else said, oh, this is a great idea, go and start the business. I would say don't do that thing right away, because everyone thinks in the same manner. So you share the market with the rest with everyone, and you just be a Mr. David, running this company with the rest of other Davids, right? You will not be someone. So make sure that you can find this important truth that no one else see, based on by your unique life experience or connecting the dots backwards. But you have to be like very mentally strong because even my parents didn't agree, right? My parents go and shut the company down right away. Top, why are you laundering money? We send you all the way to Oxford University. Are you laundering? Why? There's no need to launder money, right? And we had a lot of fights. So make sure you're mentally strong as well and really convince. You have to have this strong conviction in what you're trying to accomplish and prove everyone else is wrong.
So YC talks about this a lot, and Pete, let me know if you want to kind of move on, but YC talks about this a lot. So YC talks about what secret does your startup represent, right? So what is something like all startups, when you boil it all the way down, the startup needs to believe in some change in the world that maybe other people don't believe, right? So when you invest in that startup, you're basically believing that this world is going to change, right? So your investors are like, if I invest in BitCub, it's like cryptocurrencies is going to be a real thing, right? And everybody's going to use it, and that's the secret. And so YC often asks, like, what is your secret? And the thing that they talk about a lot is that oftentimes people optimize for probability of success of the secret and not the magnitude of success of if that secret is true. And the point that they try to make is like, nobody actually remembers all the times you were wrong. If you were right once and it was huge, right? Like you only need to be right once. And if it's such a big deal, then like, that's it, right? And the best examples of this are like Grab and Uber and all this. Their secret was basically, it turns out people will get into cars with strangers, right? And Airbnb is the same way. It turns out people will stay in people's living rooms. Exactly. And like that wasn't obvious, right? And I'm sure they got laughed out of the room so many times. Like, wait, you're telling me that a stranger is going to come pick you up and you're going to get in their car and they're going to drive you somewhere and not kidnap you? Like, okay, good luck with that, right? And they kind of persevere through that. So I think this idea of like secrets and stuff has always kind of been very interesting to me.
So what do you actually, Hsu Ken, what do you actually do when everyone else or the world is against you, right? When you're so stressed, how are you like handling your situation in your first startup?
So, we got quite burned out. I don't know if you had the same thing, but so basically when you're doing a startup, it's like some days you're really high. Like you have a really good meeting with some investor, some famous investor or whatever, or something happens and you think you're going to be the next Facebook, right? You're like, I'm going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. And then the next day, something terrible happens and you're kind of pondering your life and being like, should I go work for Facebook? I don't know why I'm doing this. And so these ups and downs are really brutal. And so what we learned to do was basically we kept repeating this mantra to ourselves, which is, it's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is. And we wanted to kind of stay even throughout the process because the ups and downs, and if you ride that whole roller coaster, it will like kill you. It's just too hectic. And so we tried to always be pretty even through that part. And so that's something that we kind of like learned throughout the way. I think the other thing that we tried to do too was, and I wonder how if you thought about this, but somewhat separate our personal kind of like self-worth from your startup. So I think one thing that we did a lot when we were doing our first startup was you embody your startup so much that if the startup isn't doing well, or if investors don't like the startup, you think you are like not like you are not worth it, right? And so we had to separate that a little bit, right? Where it's like, okay, I am not my startup. The startup is very important. I need to work on those things, but I need to kind of be resilient myself. So I think we kind of thought about it in some of those ways. And maybe the third point is that we try to think about it from, this is like very cliche Silicon Valley stuff, but first principles, right? So it's like what we like slowly build the case. And so I studied math in school and it's like you slowly build the case, right? And if you really believe in these key assumptions all the way through, then I think that gives you more strength rather than just being like, this is really hot right now. So like, okay, like we believe it because everybody else believes it, right? Like if you're doing that, you're probably not in the right place and you're not going to believe in it for very long. But I don't know, what did you find worked for you?
So I was stubborn on the ideas, on the very strong conviction that I was a strong believer in cryptocurrency, pretty much. Even my parents, tell me to shut the company down every day. I would not do it. Even I was called by the anti-money laundering officers, jail time, right? Risking jail time here. I would still not shut the companies down because
Top,
I-
top, top. Where did that come from? Sorry to interrupt you, but like, why did you believe in it so strongly? Right? It wasn't obvious, at least to me. It wasn't so obvious that crypto was going to be like a thing, and it had a lot going against it, right?
Sure, because I think I mean, maybe because of the connecting the dots backwards. Also, I had different experiences from everyone else's. I studied economics at school, and one of my favorite subjects at Oxford was the monetary of economic history. So we kind of understand the evolution of money. It changes every 50 years, like 1929, 1945, 1971, and 2020. That's like 49 years. Next year is going to be a big change. All those, and another person that I met in the Silicon Valley, right? Dan Chat, executive of PayPal. He convinced me that Bitcoin was the original vision of PayPal. They didn't want to become a payment gateway. They wanted to create a digital dollar back then, but there's no cloud computing, no blockchain, no 4G broadband internet, right? Mobile phone penetration is not great. You are the luckier generation. All those things. And also, I stumbled across an article written by Mark Anderson in 2013 that he wrote an article called "Why Bitcoin Matters." So I got to see the other dimension about this Bitcoin technology that the rest of the world did not see, right? And I didn't know who Mark Anderson was, but this guy sees new technologies at least 10 years before everyone else's does, right? He founded the first Netscape browser, and sold it to Microsoft when he was a university student. He did cloud computing 10 years before Amazon launched AWS. In 2013 he wrote, he invested a lot in cryptocurrency and Coinbase, and believing that cryptocurrency is the next thing. This is almost 10 years already also. So I think it's one of those different life experiences that you can connect backwards that form this strong conviction about something, so strong that you will not give up, right? You persevere through all the challenges. But I had different techniques, right? When talking about burnout all the time, to be honest, like
Yeah, all the time.
we worked our asses off, and after working very hard, the rest of the world is against us. Those feelings, right? So bad that every Friday I would drive to a domestic airport in Thailand, Don Mueang. Then I would park the car, pick the random flight that is about to be taken off, and I would fly to a random place on Friday nights, just to be alone for the weekend, right? And I would come back on Sunday night, and Monday I would hustle again. I did this for 7 consecutive weeks. Sometimes when you're stuck on the environment, same settings, you feel like you're running like a rat race. But when you take that trip as a getaway trip, you get to be alone, think things through, get your energy back again. And on Monday, you hustle again. I did that for 7 weeks. During those tough times, right? Anti-money laundering officers, Bank of Thailand. We were the spotlight company back then, in a bad way, of course. But I think another thing also, I hate losing. I guess personally, I did not want to lose. It wasn't about money. To be honest, actually, when I first started the company, it was about money. Right? We want to get rich quickly, entrepreneurship, but after running the company for a while, it's more like proving myself to the rest of the world, the rest of the people around me, that I was right, you guys are wrong. The rest of the world is wrong. Here's the right thing, and push through and try to prove this to everyone. So it wasn't more like on the money for me on the first company.
So actually, that motivation I think is similar for me. So I wanted to prove to my overarching thing was I wanted to prove to myself that I could start a company, right, and have it kind of be successful. I think we've invested in a fair number of companies now, and I think it actually turns out that if you go into doing a startup because you think you're going to make like fast money or make a lot of money, like you're not going to actually be able to stick through it for too long, because the chances of you actually kind of making money from it is like pretty slim actually. Like you're actually probably better off going to work at a bank or something like that, right? It's like recurring high salary. Like if that's what you want, like you should go do that. And so I feel very kind of similarly that it's like you wanted to kind of like prove this thing. By the way, Mark Andreessen is my startup hero. He is like the one that he's like my like role model. For people who don't know, he is maybe the only person to have started $3 billion companies and is now a Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz. I mean, he's like my absolute kind of like hero.
Yeah, I think a lot of people heard about Steve Jobs in Thailand, but Mark, everyone is underestimating Mark Anderson here. He's also my hero.
Cool. Wow. Okay. So the reason I actually stay quiet because I feel that this is really useful discussions, even benefiting me a lot. So I was taking a lot of notes, and then I find that something to take away from this is that find something that you truly believe in that others don't, and go for it, even though that might sometimes come with a cost and consequences, right? So I think really good points for founders, especially first-time founders, to take notes of that. Moving on to the next part. Right now we discussed through like the struggles and the hustles that you have put in on the first business. Now let's talk about mistakes, things that you have done, and then you wish that you don't do it for that time, and then things to avoid. This can be like from mistake that you have made yourself, or like mistake you have seen startup made as well. Like starting from Top.
Sure. I wasn't very fortunate for my first startup with a lot of money and resources. So I had to do everything myself. And of course, I'm not Elon Musk, right? I made a lot of mistakes. I had no idea about accounting, but based on limited resources, I had to be an accountant, right? I had no idea, about a lot of things, but I had to wear that hat based on necessity for the survival of the company. And I was like a duck, right? Nothing, good at nothing, but I had to do everything. And it could take the company to a certain point. But, when we need to get up to the next level, next stage, you need to hire properly, bring in people who are smarter than you are, right? And because of the situation that I wasn't very fortunate to have a lot of money in my first startup, we had to go back and correct things, which is way, way more costly, right? We had issues with the, revenue department because I had no idea about accounting. We had to fix our accounting from the very first transaction of the company incorporation. Legal, I was incorporating the company myself, right? Fully paid up, partial paid up. How do you structure this company for optimization? We had to go and fix all the company's structure, right? Accounting, regardless, what about KYCs and AML policies, right? You don't get taught these things at school. So we had to ramp up our reporting system, and also setting up culture, right? Core values of the company or purpose. I had no clue those things were important. I was like more like a wartime CEO. I did everything I could to make sure that the company survive and have enough money to pay everyone every month. My focus wasn't on like, hiring the best people or, setting up purpose, values, culture. Those were one of my biggest mistakes. If I started with very good people at the start, I would not go back and correct things, fix all the mistakes, which is way, way more costly. Right? I cut corners, which you guys should not do when you started a financial company. Do not cut corners. You're not selling t-shirts online, right? You're handling people's money, right? Reputation matters, trust matters, right? So I think my biggest mistakes was I was more like a time teller, not a clock builder, right? Very different skill sets, different mindsets, right? I was telling the time, pushing people to the limits, trying to maximize every penny that I saved, hiring the wrong people and fix things, go back and fix things, which is way, way more costly because we were trying to save every penny, but it ended up that decision became way, way more expensive down the road. So I think, with the second company, the reason why we grow so fast is because we hired, we are more careful now to hire the people who are bigger than we are. So eventually BitCup can become a company of giants, right? I would not hire people who are smaller than we are. Then eventually BitCup will become like a company of dwarfs, right? So I think it's very important that you find the right people. And once you find the right people, it creates this self-policing team, right? Once you have this self-policing team, it's like a kind of a momentum, right? Of who we let into our company. And our job as a founder is to make sure that everyone focuses on the mission, right? And the vision and the culture, and make sure that we do not set the hiring bar too low, right? Always set the hiring bar very high. We fire fast, hire slow, because people are the most important thing. Not people, the right people are the most important assets. Not everyone is an asset. So we try to let go very fast. Those that the bad DNA, destroying culture, do not share the same values with us, and we hire very slow. Right? We now my focus is more on finding the right people who are better than me, right, to join BitCup, so we can become a company of giants, and making sure that these smart people can work together and tell me what to do, not I tell them what to do, right? We build a clock here, not telling the time, right? We try to lead by questions. We don't lead by answers, right? Not the highest paid check, CEOs have the say on everything, right? The job of a founder is to make sure that everyone can get into a heated debate, come up with the best ideas, and fully commit on this idea as a team, right? We also become a team player. Right? So we try to lead the company with questions, being more like a facilitator, and ideas can come from anywhere. I think that's the biggest mistake, getting the wrong people into the company, but also because of very limited resources on my first company. And that's why we did not repeat the same mistakes in the second company. And of course, for me, it's super useful to start the company in the same industry, because you're pretty much repeating the same work. So, whatever did not work, I told my team right away not to do it, right? We found a better solution already. So save us a lot of time. It became the biggest company in the space in 2 years.
That's really good point. I think that's really good point. Like people is very important. Like the right people is everything, right? And I think when talking about like founders and first time founders, they are often like view themselves as like they are the one doing everything, which is not entirely right. And then like as you can see, like the progress of BitCup right now, I think has already proven that point pretty much. Switching over to Hsu Ken, like what are like your mistakes and key learnings from doing startup for 2 to 3 times?
Yeah, so I feel like I've got two, which I think are somewhat related. But the biggest difference I think I see between first-time founders and second-time founders is when it's your first time, you're not sure how to prioritize. So like, when you're starting out and you're a first-time founder, everything looks important, right? You're like, okay, I got to do how do I incorporate the company? How do I do these like legal contracts? I got to build this like product. Like there's all these things you need to do. You don't know how to do any of them. And you don't know which ones are kind of really important. And so what first-time founders end up doing is they just burn themselves out, because they try to do a really good job on everything. Like they're trying really hard, and so they kind of work on everything, right? And I think the second-time founders know what's important, right? So, at any moment in a startup, there's 100 things you need to do. And the really good founders are like, okay, I've got 100 things I need to do, but only these 3 things really matter. These other problems I can worry about later, or they don't matter. I'm going to do these 3 things, and I'm going to do really well at these 3 things. And I think that takes some experience to kind of figure out like what are those priorities. Like, I mean, one example is like we spent like 2 weeks trying to figure out like the type of entity we should incorporate in the US for our first company, and like the second company, we didn't incorporate it until we had 100,000 users, because we were just like, we'll worry about that later, right? Like, let's get the users first. I was like, not worry about the incorporation. And so I think this priority thing is something that we just didn't know how to do when we were first time around, and it was quite different the second and third time. The other thing that I would say is I think first time founders optimize for the probability of getting something right rather than iteration speed. So here's what I mean. When you're working on a product, let's say you need to be right about this. Like we need to make the right decision about this product 6 months down the road. And what we did was we would debate for 6 months then. We would debate for 5 months and then build for the 1 month. And we would launch the thing, right? And we're just trying to make sure we make the right call. And we almost never make the right call. Like, we're just not that smart. We like never made the right call. And what we ended up doing instead was like, okay, we need to be right about this in 6 months. So let's just like take shots at it every 2 weeks. So we have 12 shots at this, right? So like rather than debate for 5 months, let's debate for like a week. Let's build it for a week. Let's get it out there. Let's get feedback, change it, and then eventually you will get to the right decision much faster. And so I think our accelerator is called Iterative for a reason, because we think that's really kind of like the key to kind of doing startups. It's not like you launch this, you work on this thing for 2 years and then you launch it and you're like, look at this great thing that I spent the past 2 years building. It actually is like, hey, I had this funny idea. I launched it in a week, and then like next week I'm like trying this like next thing, and you're kind of working along the way. So I think for first time founders, those are the two things I think I would push them to kind of think about is, out of all the things you're doing, what are the things that actually are kind of really important, and focus on those things. And then the second part is, don't be afraid about getting stuff wrong, as long as you're kind of getting stuff wrong quickly and you're kind of making changes about it. So I think those two things are the things that we probably learn the most.
Cool. Yeah, prioritizations, and I think the second thing is something that I think a lot of founders can relate to as well, especially me. Like getting it perfect the first time is like it's just impossible.
So Reid Hoffman is the one of the LinkedIn co-founders. He has a famous quote about this, and he said, "If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long." And I think that's something that's really important to people that you should think about, right? You need to build thick skin as a founder. No matter what you do, people are going to not like it. And so I think the fastest way to building something that people are going to want and like is to actually get it out there in front of people and kind of like work on it.
Cool. Good takeaways. Anything you want to add to that, Topp? Or we can move on to the next sections.
Sure. Just to add on Hsu Ken on the product literation, I think our job as a founder is not to go and design the product ourselves, but to make sure that we can design the environment where people can work on the product until it works, creating the best, bringing in the best people, and they're the one designing the product. We're not expert on everything, right? But our job is to create this healthy environment where everyone can fail, can try, can work, can push the product out very fast. Because what is a company? A company is when a group of people comes together and work on a mission, right? So the first thing is to make sure that you bring in the right people, and once you have the right people, you can change ideas later, right? These people are the one telling us the strategies, right? What's going to be the next strategies? What's going to be the next product? Not the other way around. We don't start with ideas or products and then we hire people, because what if that product doesn't work, or if that idea doesn't work? Then you have to let these people go, because you hired people based on the first idea or the first product. But if you start with people, right? You don't start with what, you start with who, right? If you start with people who share the same values, right? Who share the same mission, then these people will work together until they find the right product, right? Literate until they find the right product, right? I think that's another dimension that I see differently from my first to my second company, right? If I am the investor, I would not invest in a company with great ideas but very poor group of people, who doesn't share any set of values or full of B's and C's players. Right? I would invest in a company with zero idea but full of A players who share the same values. Then they would work their ass off to come up with literate so many different products until they found the one that is working. But they have a very strong mission together, right?
Just to add on to that, so we do a fair bit of investing now. We have a scorecard for how we invest in companies, and we invest in very early stage companies, right? And about 80% of the weight is actually on the founders, because in early stage startups, ideas change all the time, right? Like, you could invest in a company. We've done it. We've invested in a company, and 2 weeks later, it's like, okay, where they're changing their idea completely, right? So it's exactly like you said. I think the people, especially in the early days, is really important.
Interesting. So actually, moving on to the next part, right? I think that's to second point. Like Iterative is like now investing in startup already in the first batch. How is Iterative like helping startup to avoid those mistakes and like talking specifically into more like Thai startups, like Thai startup ecosystems, or like what would be your chance in coming to Bangkok to like invest in the company?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to invest in a company in Bangkok like yesterday. So we are absolutely like open to investing in Bangkok. I personally think there's a lot of kind of good things happening in Thailand, and so I would love to kind of get more involved. How we help out is I think a lot of the stuff that Topp and I have been talking about, right? And look, I'd love to tell you that we're going to help you avoid all the first-time founder mistakes, but like it's almost impossible, right? Like you're going to have to kind of like figure a lot of this stuff out yourself. But I think what we can do is we can help you avoid some of the obvious ones. So I think I spent about 5 or 6 years in Silicon Valley, and I think one of the things that is different there than maybe Southeast Asia, which I think is going to change, hopefully we can play a part in this, is that in Silicon Valley, the best practices and all of the frameworks for how to think about stuff are kind of like well distributed. So like everybody kind of knows them. And I think that they are not as well distributed in Southeast Asia. And so that's something that we want to help people with, right? So, one of the just very concrete things that we talk to companies about is we try to help them understand like, what does fast actually mean? So sometimes we talk to companies and we're like, okay, well, how fast are you growing? And they're like, oh, we're growing 10% a week or 10% a month. And we're like, okay, well, is that fast? And they're like, yeah, I mean, that seems pretty fast. Like, there's this bank that grows like 2% a year. Like, we're 10% a month. That's much better than the bank, right? And we're actually like, that actually is not that fast. So in Silicon Valley and in YC, their bar is you want to be growing 5 to 7% every week. So if you grow 7% every week for a year, you grow about 33x, and you grow 5% a week for a year, you're about 12.6x. And for early stage startups, you should be able to kind of do those types of things if you're kind of really going fast. I mean, your numbers are small, so you can kind of grow quickly. Maybe if you're top size, I think that's a little bit trickier. I mean, if you grew 33x, he probably takes over the world at this point. But I think at early stage, you kind of want to do that. And so we help with some of the accountability and then talk to startups about how to kind of achieve that level of growth. And we meet with founders a lot. So I think one of the things that we try to help out with was, and Topp, I'm curious if you felt this way. When we started the company, we didn't really know any other founders. And so it felt like you were very alone. And you were kind of doing this thing and you didn't know anybody else who had done this thing before. You didn't really have anybody to go and talk to or get advice from. And so that's like a role that we want to play. I think it can be tough to talk to investors sometimes about the things that are going really bad. And by the way, like there's always things that are going really bad. And so we want to be the safe space where, we have also been in your shoes before and like provide support and, like Top story, we recently had a company that was like raided by the police, like a government agency, right? And we were the first phone call. It was like, oh my gosh, this is happening right now. I don't know what to do. And we, and to be honest, I didn't know what to do either, but I think sometimes you just need somebody else to kind of be like, okay, like calm down, like let's figure this out and we can kind of like talk through it. So we spend a lot of time working with founders more than anything else.
I think it's a great idea, to have a founders club, because obviously we cannot talk to anyone else and they would share the same understanding, right? Founders, only understand founders. You cannot talk to your friends, who is working in a big corporation. They are not in your shoes. They would not understand. No. We maybe need a place or a club where we share. I have been through that before. Here, don't worry. We need to find this founders club.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes you don't want to. You can't talk to some of the people in the company sometimes too, right? Like as a founder, there's like a vulnerability that you can only kind of share with certain people, and I think that's kind of that's really important. Like Topp, I'm sure you'd be like so helpful to anybody who's dealing with like regulations and stuff. It's like any problems that they go through, you're like, I've been there. Don't worry, like it's fine. I've been there, and like that's so valuable, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Like Thai startup ecosystems, like both of you Top like has a lot of experience in like Southeast Asia startups, and Hsu Ken has also like a little bit of experience like especially in Singapore. Like how would like what is the current situations of Thai startup ecosystems right now? Like what do we need to improve like to grow even better for Thai startups? Like any thoughts on that?
I feel like Topp knows this better than I mean, Topp is like a big part of the community in Thailand, so I feel like he knows better than I do here.
Sure. So you know, surprisingly, there's no unicorn yet for Thailand. There's one in every country in this region. Even Vietnam has a unicorn already. So I think we are looking to build, you know, the first unicorn, hopefully, and we're looking forward to finally have a unicorn in Thailand. Maybe there's a few reasons why there's no unicorns, right? Thai people are very smart, right? We have Agoda, you know, they're outsourcing their workforce here in Thailand at actually a lot of companies. But I think one of the main obstacles why there's no unicorn yet is also down to regulations. We cannot do things like Grab or Line in Thailand. Right? If the founder is Thai, he or she would be in jail already, right? But luckily, Grab was from Malaysia. Line is from the outside, you know, from South Korea, Japan. Then they grow so fast until it's too big to fail. Right? It became a new norm, and finally the regulation changes. And unfortunately, Thai builders cannot build Grab or Line legally. I think that's the main reason. And the reason why there's the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in Thailand is Thai-owned is because I persevere through all those you know, regulations. I would, you know, maybe, you know, believe the same thing if there's another Thai person who persevere through Grab or Line in their own regulation. There could be a Thai-owned Grab or Thai-owned Line version, but unfortunately, there's none yet. I think the main reason why the main obstacles for the Thai startup ecosystem is down to regulations and people crazy enough to push the boundaries because these things are very new, right? Yeah.
So I think one thing I would add on to, I feel like part of what I'm trying to do, or part of what Iterative is trying to do, is try to make entrepreneurship in Southeast Asia, and maybe specifically Thailand, easier than Topp had it, right? Like if everybody has to go through what Topp went through, I think we're going to be in like a tricky place, right? Because I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that want to persevere like that much. I mean, you need to persevere to a certain amount, but like, I mean, Topp, I think you would probably even say too, like, you know, we need more entrepreneurship in Thailand and throughout Southeast Asia. And I think one way to kind of do that is to like try to help people, try to make it easier and more accessible to people so that you don't have to kind of like, it's going to be challenging, but maybe we can kind of help it be less challenging in some areas, right? Like, you know, the government, maybe, you know, it's not much, I can personally kind of like help with that. But I can maybe kind of help with some of the how to get started and what are some of the like how to think about good ideas and how do you kind of like hire the first couple people and like some of those things. So I think a lot of what we think about is how to make entrepreneurship more accessible to people in Southeast Asia so that, you know, more people can kind of get involved.
Cool. That's really great. And I think to that to Topp's point, I think regulations is something that Thai startup ecosystems has been like lagging a little bit behind the regions. But yeah, I think we should be catching up.
Can I also say that's wild that Thailand does not have a unicorn? That seems crazy to me. Like that's I don't know. That's just
exactly
surprising to me. Like Thailand should have a unicorn, right? I think P has shared with me too that there's not been a Thai startup in YC, which also blows my mind, right? Like,
yes,
these things should be happening in Thailand. So I don't know. Thailand is certainly capable of these things.
I mean, maybe Bitcoin can be.
Yeah, we are definitely a hidden gem here, but we need to find a way to extract this, you know, for the country.
Cool. So we are coming to an end a little bit, but last questions to Top before we go on to the live questions that we have quite a bit here. As BitCup has grown to this stage, like reflecting back, what would be like how would you feel about it? Like you have gone through like the whole journey, the whole roller coaster of it, and then what would be the next step for BitCup, as you have shared a little bit already?
Sure. After the first startup, people looking from the outside would say it was a successful journey, right? Big exit, big investors win, the team wins, after, Gojek acquired coins. But after all the key players left, the company tanked, right? We pretty much wasted coins pretty much wasted like 7 years of building things for the world. Now like making zero impact, right? What a waste of time. For the startup side, it's a big win, right? Everyone cashes out. But from an entrepreneurial spirit, I feel like we kind of let down the previous generation of entrepreneurs. Right? We did not build a long-lasting company. It was more like a quick cash, thing. With BitCup, I think that's not wrong either. I mean, most of the entrepreneurs when they start the company, the first goal is to get rich, right? That's the first goal of most entrepreneurs. But when the company grows to a certain size, then we start wanting different thing now. We want to create more impact. Most people start with the former, but ended up with a latter when they grow to a certain size, wanting to create more impact. And what establishes, between good and great companies? Right now, most of the startups are good companies, right? Most of the companies are good, but very few are great. I think this can be applied to every industry, right? If you talk about footballers, most of the footballers are good. Very few are great footballers, right? I don't know if you guys watch football, but I love football, right? Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi were two great players. They got all the prizes, awards in the last 10 years. No one else, these two, took all the awards. The rest of the footballers are good footballers. Only a few were great, like Pele, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi. If you talk about pianists, most of the pianists are good pianists. Only a few are great pianists, right? Mozart and very few. Same with companies. Most of the companies are good companies. Very few are great companies, right? Companies like Apple, right? Walt Disney, right? IBM. Why are these like very long-lasting companies? Where is Steve Jobs now? He's no longer here, but Apple is able to achieve a $2 trillion company for the first time in human history, right? Whereas Disney, the founder, Walt Disney is still, prosper, right? Whereas IBM founder, right? These are very few exceptional companies. So my next step now is to turn BitCup from a good company to a great company. And that's a huge challenge, right? And, when you have a different goal, your perspective started to change, right? Your action started to change. And when I studied and dig deeper, what makes something great? They all share very similar properties, right? Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, they focus on what they do, right? They don't play badminton, they don't go swimming, they only play football. They focus, right? Great players. They only do one thing, and they're great at it, right? And the second property, they are passionate in what they do, right? Even though they have the talent, Cristiano Ronaldo was the first one to jump into the training field, the last one to leave the training field. They're passionate in what they do. They have this ownership and beyond quality, right? When you're passionate about something, enough is not a word. Right? How do we get better and better every day? That's the ownership and beyond quality of anything great. And the last thing, they have this purpose beyond profit, right? LA Galaxy, an American league, tried to buy all the great players. No one goes to them because Money cannot buy great players, right? They have purpose beyond money. Same with pianists, right? They don't play drums, they don't play guitar, right? They only practice piano, and they're passionate in what they do, and they have purpose beyond profit. If we talk about companies, how do we turn a company from good to great, right? We need to focus in what we're good at. What is our hedgehog? What is the reason why BitCup exists in this world, right? And we need to focus in what we're good at. Then, we have to have this ownership and beyond, right? Quality. You are passionate, finding something that we are passionate about. And what is the purpose beyond profit here, right? If we were to think of the company as the same as my first company, then after everyone cashes out, the company would tank. It's definitely not going to be a long-lasting company. So we have to have this strong mission that never changes in whatever generation, right? What is the founder's values, principle that we need to live up to? So I think the next goal for BitCup is to create a great company, and the skill set, it's totally different. The mindset is totally different. We need to focus more on the culture, right? The core values, right? And the mission and the vision of the company. My first company was more like, we tried our best to motivate people, right? With money, but we failed at inspiring people, right? With this company, I try to inspire people, not motivate people now, right? With big, hairy, audacious goal. How do we build a clock where if I am no longer in this company, it is still going to be a great company without the founder, right? How do we make this a long-lasting company? I think that's my next goal for BitCup.
Cool. Build a good company. Not only build a good company, but a great company. I think that's really puts a very nice summary of what we have discussed today, and hopefully, founders have learned a lot from these sessions. So on the last part, we'll go through some of the questions that we have. So the first question here is that, so regarding the second last questions, how can the government support startup? I think specifically more in Thailand. How can government support more startups in Thailand? I think these questions might go over to Kun Topp, as you've probably experienced a lot coordinations with governments.
Sure. So the government would need to allow startups to do things without intervening first, right? Because everyone is going to disagree with new ideas, right? They're scared of new things. That's the human nature. But when regulation steps in, it slows everything down and prevents things from happening. So they need to start with an open, mindset, and create a safe environment where everyone can speak their mind, share ideas, and get things done, right? Moving forward first. Until it gets to a certain size, then the regulation can maybe steps in if it's going to affect a lot of people. Try to create this environment where everyone is not scared to try new things for Thailand, and the government should also incentivize more people to come out and take the risk, start their own startup, right? Whether the government can do a tax incentive for very good employees to take risk, to create their own startup. If you are an entrepreneur, you have this tax incentive, or a co-investment scheme where government would co-invest with VCs to support the startup ideas. Actually, we should have this government funds also to invest in only the seed round stage. Most of the private companies have a lot of money to invest, but they don't invest in early stage, in seed round, right? It's very hard for this startup to find money in the early stage. But when the ideas are working, scaling phase, the Series A post, right? A lot of people are fighting to invest now because no one would want to keep money in the bank, very low interest rate. They only go for the ones that are already working well. So I think the role of the government is to create this fund where the riskier idea can get started until they can gain traction, and don't go and steal the investment from the private companies for the later stage. Let the private companies invest because they need to seek high return. Right? That's their job. But the government is to get things started, right? To do tax incentive for people to jump into an idea and get the company started. To have this seed round money and to make sure that the regulation allows them to start this crazy idea first before they step in. I think that's my advice for the government. And maybe also to bring in a lot of smart people into Thailand because founder is just a facilitator, right? You need good people around you. So make sure that this visa regulation and work permit regulation allows people to move to Thailand quickly, easily, very low cost. We have very good, sea, beaches, beach, sun, sand. Everyone would want to work in Thailand already. We just need to remove this, work permit and visa requirements, so we can attract good people, attract good money, and everyone can start companies easier. That's my take.
Yeah. So actually, to Hsu Ken a little bit, like given that you're now living in Singapore and you have a lot of experience in the US, like does government play any role in helping like startups that you have seen, or like anything you can share?
So I mean, I think so. I guess I can talk about two different countries, right? So the US, not really. The US kind of just stays out of it, right? Like the government doesn't fund any startups, but the US government kind of just stays out of it, right? So companies kind of like can take their own path, which I think Topp was talking about. It sounds like maybe the Thai government kind of gets involved a little bit, and the US government kind of doesn't. The Singapore government gets quite involved in the early stage, right? So they do a bunch of investments in the early stages. So they do a lot of the stuff that I think Topp is talking about. And they have a sovereign wealth fund, and they just do a lot of investments, especially in deep tech and these types of things. I think the one thing that, just to add on to what Topp was talking about is, which by the way, P, you know this, if I was going to live somewhere else in Southeast Asia and it not be Singapore, it would definitely be Bangkok. Like, I absolutely love Bangkok. Like, I can't wait to go back. I would live in Bangkok. So hopefully, the visa stuff is kind of easy if I ever kind of like go do that. One of the things that is the secret sauce of Silicon Valley is you need homegrown winners, right? And so I think one of the things that the government can do to potentially help is support its existing entrepreneurs. Because I think there's nothing that galvanizes a group of people more than somebody from that group doing really well. And I think one of the powerful things of Silicon Valley is everybody in Silicon Valley knows somebody, like personally, like they're quite good friends, who has done really well. And if you know somebody that has done really well, you find out that they're not mythical beings. Like, I have college friends who like started like very kind of like huge companies, right? Like multiple time unicorns. And it's like, I remember when they were like, they never did their homework and they were goofing off. And I didn't think they were that smart. And now they are like the founder of some billion-dollar company, right? And I think every time you hear stories like that, you're like, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it, right? And I think that's actually really important. And so when I hear stuff like Thailand doesn't have a unicorn and they haven't got through YC and some of these kind of stuff, I think it makes it harder. And again, look, I'm not Thai. I don't live in Thailand. So, I'm curious what you guys think. But if you have like more Thai people doing these things and are from Thailand, they like live in and all of that, then I think it's easier for other people to kind of see those and be like, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it, right? And I think that ends up being really important. So I don't know, maybe like Topp can be the, BitCup can be the first unicorn, right? And everybody can look at Topp and be like, okay, well, Topp, if Topp can do it, then like maybe I can do it too, right? And I just think that ends up being really important.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like finding someone, especially like role models that you can relate to, like very much like, oh, like this guy was living like next door and then he's doing good. Yeah, I think that's something that we can I think once we have that, then probably like we will inspire a lot more of young generations to start a company. Cool. We have time for another questions, which I think I'll combine these questions together. I think this is a really good questions here. So given limited resources, like both of you have talked about, like when you first started out, you have really limited resources like money, time, and everything, right? How do you then like extract or like maximize like the return like for employees, like, and another questions which is kind of relate to this, how does like startups like pull in like talented individuals to join the company given like the limited resources that you have in the first place? Yeah, so maybe like starting off from Hsu Ken, like, yeah, you might have some thought on
So I think there's two things. So the Silicon Valley works very differently in this case, right? So in Silicon Valley, people really are interested in equity. And so they actually want to go work at startups because the upside is much greater, right? So, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but in the Valley, I always used to make I would make two offers to somebody, right? So P, if you were going to work for me again, I'd be like, okay, P, here's this offer. It's this much money and this much equity. And then I would give another offer that is less salary and higher equity, right? And in Silicon Valley, everybody took the higher equity one. So you often can kind of get a lot of the really good people like not working at Google and stuff because it's like, okay, yeah, you can go work at Google, you make pretty good money, but like there's not a ton of upside, not as much as you work at a startup. So that's a little bit different. But I don't think that's how the ecosystem works here, right? So people if you haven't seen equity be worth a lot, then you're not going to value it very much. So I don't think that works here. I think one of the things that we have done, and P, you know this firsthand because I feel like when we worked together, I like gave you this pitch. But it really is, I try to sell like how much you're going to learn by working at a startup. I think that's kind of an important thing, right? So, if you are trying to recruit people to your company, especially if you don't have resources, look, if I run a startup, I'm not going to be able to compete with Grab and Gojek and, Stripe on salary. There's no way, right? And honestly, if you are optimizing for salary, like you should probably go work at one of those companies. But I always tell people, say, look, if you're interested in learning a lot in a short amount of time, you should come work at one of our companies, work for a startup. If you are interested in doing a startup at some point in the future, you should definitely come work at one of our companies. And so I think for us, we're like always trying to kind of find people who kind of want to do these things. And so we try to sell the stuff that is like less tangible, right? But ultimately, I think taking it back all the way to the very beginning of this conversation, I think Topp and I both, when we started, we were optimizing for skill set and learning. And so that's the thing that, if you come work for a startup, that's what you're going to get. So I don't know, Topp, what do you guys do?
Sure. So now I started to see a longer term view on people. In my first company, I would tell everyone what to do, squeeze, reduce all the mistakes, making sure that every penny is worth it. But for my second startup, I started to see longer term view. I allow people to make mistakes, right? So they can learn. I'm not going to be the time teller. Right? I'm building a clock. Right, and so I lead the company by questions, not by answers. And the first thing that I do is if we were to use this footballers analogy, I'm not going to hire like Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi, right? Very expensive, very already capable individuals, overpriced. But I hire, trying to see the next Cristiano Ronaldo, the ones that were the first to join the training pitch, the last one to leave, right? Those the values. I hire people based more on core values, which have the same set of values, work ethic, and the hard skill. We learn every day. These people able to scale themselves, keep up with the company's growth. Do you know the interesting story about BitCup is that the president, the second biggest role in the company, she graduated from an architecture background, right? She doesn't even know how to do Excel when she first joined the company, right? And this is a financial company. She doesn't know how to run Excel, right? And now she looks after 100 and, almost 200 people, 180 people. So I hire people based on the things that are hard to change. The mindsets, the values, these are very hard to change. But everyone has two legs, two arms. We can train them, on the hard skill. And I allow people to make mistakes. I started to see longer term view on people now. Right? I don't want them. I let them make mistakes. I let them grow. I let them grow into filling, be able to fill in the position. Right? Allow room to grow. Allow freedom to fail. And also, how do we bring in smart people to join, or the people with the right values? You need to inspire people, right? You don't go and create a company that sells another t-shirts online, right? You're not going to be able to attract good players. You need to inspire, not to motivate, right? You don't go and motivate people, go and inspire people. You have to have a very strong conviction of something, that this is the big hairy audience's goal that we are trying to accomplish together as a team. This is the mission. This is at least once in a lifetime you can proudly tell everyone that you're part of this team trying to create this something new for Thailand. We are the crazy ones, the ones that people laugh at, but no one can ignore us because we change things. Those kind of things. You need to inspire people. That's why we can bring in a different type of people to join the company. And also, communication is very important, not just internally, right? External communication. People wanting to work for us because they see clear values of what BitCup represents. What are the core values of the company? What are the mission of the company? Once you master your communication, it's going to be easier to attract, good people, because sometimes money is not the only main motivation for people, right? The ability to be part of something big, big hairy audience's goal can also bring in, a different candidates. These are my tips I would like to share for forming the team.
Great. I mean, like, a point to take note to everyone: scout for like the next best talent, not Cristiano Ronaldo, right? as another joke.
Sometimes just to add quickly, if you bring in like Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi right away, they already have their set of values. How do you know that those set of values are the same as yours? The founder's principle. Even though they're so good at their job, right? Super good at their job, no one can question their hard skill. But when you bring in outside people in, you're going to contaminate this culture or values. It's like blood, right? If you add water in, it's very hard to get back to the same status again, right? It's fully diluted after that. So we make sure that we promote homegrown management, make sure that we found the right values first, and then we see longer term view on people, allow them to make mistakes and grow into the people that you expect them to eventually.
Great. I think that's really like wraps up our life today. I personally agreed a lot with the mindset, like you bring really smart people, but with not the right mindset, then that's more difficult than someone with the right mindset. All right. So that's been it. That's all the time that we have right now. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you both, Kun Topp and Hsu Ken, for tuning in. I believe everyone, especially founders, will learn a lot from the sessions. If anyone has any comments or suggestions, feel free to drop them down below. And stay tuned for the next live. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.